If I were to show you the stat line of a 22-year-old lefty in AAA and said he had an 11.5 K per nine rate, only gave up 0.65 homers per nine, and his walk rate was around 4 per nine, you would say, sign me up all day. Would you not?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, those were Josh Hader's numbers in 14 AAA starts. And more impressively than that, his 11 before that in AA were even better. It's phenomenal what this guy has done. There are some who doubt his effectiveness and if it will play at the major league level. There are still others who doubt his funky delivery and if A, it costs him an injury, and B, forces him to move to the bullpen. The fact of the matter is, he's 6'3", so he has the size to remain a viable starter. And more importantly, the numbers I'm giving you, they're not projections. He's actually been this good. I go by production. It's hard to quantify sometimes when you see a guy that's not producing and people are saying, but he projects well. Not only does Hader project well, but he's been producing. So at what point do you start saying, maybe this is who the guy is? He will be in Milwaukee to start the season or very soon after if they play the service time game, which in Milwaukee being the Brewers, they probably should because they should extend the life of any player they keep within their own organization. There's really only one fear I have with Hader, and that is Rich Wilson's voice in the back of my head constantly chirping that he sees, the comparison to Chris Sale, and the delivery is extremely worrisome to him. Again, other than that, I'm all in on him as a starter. I think you should be too. It is something to have some concern over, but again, going back to what the production been, it's been phenomenal. So Hader is a guy that I am certainly not hating on, and I'm really hoping that my cohort over here, Mr. Lifshitz, feels the same way.
Apparently, you haven't been reading my top 100 lists over the last year. I am the high guy on Josh Hader. I was leading the Josh Hader charge when he was coming out of the Arizona Fall League. Obviously, he was only pitching in relief stints there. And, he was ramping the fastball up to 98 miles an hour. There was a huge jump in terms of how nasty his stuff was. And I actually ranked him in my midseason top 100. I believe it was 11th overall. So I'm significantly higher on Hader than anybody else. I probably will be again. People started to catch up a little bit. I think this guy is potentially the best left-handed prospect in all of baseball. He brings to the table an upper 90s fastball, as I was just talking about. He has a nasty, nasty slider with really sharp break. Bit of an inconsistent change, but it has gotten better. He's got a little bit more feel for the change. And he puts that all together from a three-quarters delivery that he throws from the first base side of the rubber. So when he made that switch in terms of setting up, all the way to the first base side, he's been able to really be deceptive not only to right-handed batters but to left-handed batters as well when he's coming in over the top. And it's tough for them to pick up the spin in the ball. And I think that's why his swing and miss stuff has been so good, besides obviously the high octane on the fastball and the nasty sharp break on the slider. His numbers, if you look at just the ERA, wasn't great, but he was pitching in Colorado Springs, which with, formerly High Desert, which no longer has a minor league affiliate, and then Lancaster, which is the same. That's probably one of the top 2 or 3 or 4 hitters' paradises in all of baseball in the minor leagues. So I would take those numbers with a grain of salt. My hope is that he does break camp with the Brewers, because I do not want to see him back in Colorado Springs. It destroyed a prospect that was high on a lot of people's radars or lists last year, Jorge Lopez, and it took him all the way to winter ball in Puerto Rico this year to really rebound. So I don't want Hader to lose confidence, because if you look at the peripheral numbers, the strikeout per nine numbers, the walk numbers, all that stuff, it was still really, really good. He got blown up in a few starts in Colorado Springs, and it is the PCL on top of it. So I think overall you can always discount what those ERAs are, because that's just a hitter's paradise league overall. But I love Hader. I think that he's somebody you should be targeting, in any kind of draft where you can stash a pitcher. even if it's shallow as like a 12-team league in a Yahoo, a head-to-head where you have NA spots and you can stash somebody that's a prospect. Hader's somebody I would definitely target and stash. Obviously, in any deep dynasty formats or keeper or anything like that, Hader is a must target if he's not owned. I love him. I think that initially up front, he'll have his moments where, he has, as we call him over on Razzball, some roofies, some games where just out of nowhere he gives up 7 runs. But he's going to have some excellent string of starts as well. I think you just have to play matchups early on as a rookie pitcher, but he's always going to give you Ks and not walk a ton of batters. So I think in 2 or 3 years, we could be talking about a dominant lefty type. He gets a lot of this Chris Sale comps because of what his stuff is. Obviously, how he throws, he's got that funky windup. A lot of people have the injury risk. They've had the injury risk with Sale. What's happened? I think we've seen some guys that had what we thought were nice, clean mechanics end up having to have Tommy John surgery. It's a guessing game. You just really don't know. The other thing I see thrown out there is the bullpen risk. I don't see that being the case at all any longer. This guy's going to be a starter. And I think that his floor is probably a mid-rotation guy who has his blow-ups but always has good K numbers. His ceiling is Chris Sale. I mean, as I always say, if you take a look at the guy's picture, he's ugly. He looks like Randy Johnson, and he throws like Chris Sale. I love Josh Hader. You should own him.
Well, just a few counterpoints to everything you were saying, and I'm not disputing any of them. But again, this is more probably a dynasty-minded episode when we do the prospects. So he probably is absolutely owned in every dynasty league. I think the question comes more into, is this a guy I should be believing in and trading, or if I own him, is this a guy I should not be believing in and trying to dump? It depends on what you can get for him. But if people are worried about the injury risk and everything like that, like I was saying before, and I think as Ralph was saying, at some point you just got to look at the production and say, listen, if it happens, it happens. It can happen to anybody. Anybody can get injured. Some people just have different mechanics and they know how to use those, and that's what the repertoire is. As far as what you were mentioning with the numbers I started this segment by quoting were just solely his 14 AAA starts. As you can see, on the stat line that we have down here, his career numbers have been great. His last 2 years have been even better, the bulk of which have been at AA, which has just been phenomenal. And the difference is, and the reason there's a lot of optimism, at least in my eyes, is the strikeout rate didn't change at all. There was no downtick as he moved up a level. The only real difference was the home runs given up, which led to the ERA being slightly inflated. And again, that goes back to Colorado Springs being a hitter's haven. So you can almost throw that out and say, hey, this was the same pitcher that we saw at AA, only added an extra run to his ERA total, because that's just what happens in this league, in this ballpark in particular. I do think they should play the service time game. If I were the Brewers GM, kind of leaning on what Ralph was saying with Jorge Lopez, I would have Hader pitch in AA to start 2017 until he was ready to come up to the bigs, because I don't think AAA was doing anything better or worse for him, other than, as you said, maybe muddling up his confidence a little because a couple more balls will leave in the park. You want him to go out and throw and get his arm warm and ready to come up to the pros. AA is going to do it. Play the service time game. Bring him up from AA. I'm good to go with that. The other added benefit, he's playing in the NL Central. So, that should just aid him as a pitcher, especially a power pitcher, especially a lefty. There's just a ton to love with Hader. If you're looking for a redraft name, he's definitely somebody you might want to stash late, because he should, and he will and should definitely be up in Milwaukee this year. It's just a question of how long is the wait going to be. If you're in Dynasty, you should definitely be targeting him. I think we're sold on Hader.